I have been doing work in this field of sports impact for over 21 years. I serve as the co-founder and co-director of the Sports and Entertainment Impact Collective, also known as SEIC. My colleague Mary Wolf and I direct SEIC, which includes the leading executive education certificate program for sports and entertainment impact leaders to enhance their skills, learn about topics relevant to the field from best-in-class faculty, and to share knowledge and network with one another. In addition to SEIC's annual executive education certificate program, we also create moments like this where we convene our sector for important conversations around developing trends. Artificial intelligence is not something we claim to be experts on or that we even have a solid opinion on at this point, to be honest with you. But we felt like as leaders in the sports and entertainment impact field that we were at the forefront of opportunities and challenges facing leaders in this space. And we feel there's no better way to learn than together in a safe and trusted community. As a reminder, we ask that you stay muted and off camera throughout the program today. We are recording this and we'll share a link with everyone afterwards. And we also encourage you to have active participation in the chat. So feel free to throw in reactions or questions as we go. What we saw with what you shared when you signed up for this session, a majority of you know little about this topic and about 60% have never used it before. So to start, we thought it would be helpful to show everyone a sample of what we mean when we talk about AI and what we mean when we talk about ChatGPT, which is one of the platforms that you can use for this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you an example of how this works. So this is a technology, the system, you can see the link at the top. So you would Google ChatGPT and it would take you to this link with the openai.com. And then if you enter into this box at the bottom, I've entered how will ChatGPT impact philanthropy? And, oh, hold on one second. This is how this works, technology. So I'm going to go to a new, I'm going to click new chat and hit how will ChatGPT impact philanthropy? And then it will generate a response. So it's like you're having a conversation with this AI bot, basically. And so this is what will happen. And then as you get a response, you can continue to ask certain questions. So clearly has a lot to say about this. And then what you can do is basically expand on that and say, can you share this in the form of a poem, for example? And then what it'll do is write you a poem about this topic. So there's a lot of different ways you could imagine using this in your work, which we're going to talk about today. But this is just some examples about, so you can see the platform, see what happens in real time, and to give you that sense of how this all works, especially for those who haven't used it. And to be totally honest, I haven't used it that much myself. So I am learning right there with you today, but this is just to give you a sense of how that works.
I don't want to interrupt our robot friend's rhyming scheme there, but I'm going to jump in. I'm Mary Wolf, and as Alicia shared, we're really excited to be with you today, and we're going to dive into hearing from the incredible panelists that we have with us. I'm going to call for our panelists a reminder on each of you individually with a specific question that relates to your expertise. When it's your turn, if you just want to spend 30 seconds at the start introducing yourself, I think that'll be really helpful to everyone listening. So Josh, I'm going to start with you. Could you please let us know, what do we need to know about all of this and how does it even work?
Thanks, Mary. Hi, I'm Josh Greenberg. I'm a program director at the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. It's a 90-year-old philanthropy that mainly focuses on funding basic research in science and technology. I run the technology grants portfolio. I've been thinking a lot about the implications of AI for scientific research, for society more generally, and for philanthropy and grant making. So I'm thrilled to be here today. So I figured what I want to do is give you a 3-minute crash course, high-level tour of the history of AI and what's actually going on behind that web interface that you see. So for much of the history of AI as a field, which goes back, earlier in the 20th century, AI meant defining rules to govern a system's behavior. So, for example, if you think about a car, you would actually have to write, when you see a stop sign, stop the car. And you'd write a ton of rules like that. You'd try to document all the possible rules, and then you'd have a system that could operate and respond in a way that seemed intelligent. So the development on top of that happened a couple of decades ago was what's called machine learning. Again, I want to make sure you know a couple of the key terms in the field. So machine learning was a different way of getting at having a system that could seem intelligent. The idea is, rather than defining all the rules up front, you get a ton of data, and then you use algorithms to find correlations in that data, to find things that seem to sort of, if this happens, then this happens. So you might get a ton of driving data, and then you would find the fact that in that data, you would realize when there's an 8-sided red sign that has the letters STOP on it, then cars tend to stop. And so you would come up with that, document it. It was an incredibly powerful tool because it meant that you could pull those kind of insights out of huge amounts of data. And the broad interest in data over the past couple decades really came out of that kind of capability. So people started taking machine learning as an approach and stacking these kinds of things together. You could have a machine learning algorithm that learns from another machine learning algorithm. That became something called deep learning. And these systems got bigger and bigger. Particularly over the past decade, there's been more work in that direction. So that's all well and good, and that's how things were progressing. But what happened in the past 6 months? That's when things seem to have really tipped over an edge. And what happened was a new approach to machine learning that's called large models, or foundation models. Generative AI is a word you hear a lot. And what happened was people realized that there was a way of building these models called a transformer that meant that you could work with more data than ever before, build a model that was so big that it seemed almost general purpose. And that then you could train it not just on bits of data, but on the entire internet, on Wikipedia, on sort of any data you could get and feed in, you could build these models. A company called OpenAI, you just saw a demo of one of their tools, has been really leading the sort of like public visibility of this work. This has been happening in major companies like Google and Facebook. OpenAI has been the most public about releasing what they've been doing. And they created a thing called GPT, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's sort of a big sort of foundational AI trained model that has been trained on all this different data, and is basically really, really good at predicting based on a prompt. You give it a prompt like, tell me about the role of AI in philanthropy, and it will predict based on those characters, what are the most likely characters to come back, drawing from all of the data that it's been trained on. It doesn't understand any of those concepts. It doesn't, at a deep level, think in that sense. It's really sort of, you give it a prompt, it'll give you back what it thinks the most likely response is going to be. However, it works at such a scale that it's almost like something like magical happens, and it seems to work in a way that that everyone, I think we've all really responded to. So OpenAI has released, they've gone through several versions of this. They released GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, now they're on GPT-4, and they built these specific applications on top. ChatGPT is one that you just saw. It's optimized for chatting, for interaction. You don't just give it one prompt and get a response back. You can have a conversation with it and it'll keep shaping the thing that it's giving back to you. There's another one called DALL-E, DALL-E, which you give it a text prompt and it'll give you back an image or a set of images of that, of whatever you've described. There are a set of others. This kind of work is starting to be applied to video, to sound. we're really at the early days of this sort of core technology being implemented in a ton of different contexts. One other thing to note, the current landscape, you've got Google, Facebook in there, OpenAI. There's another company called Hugging Face, which is named for the kind of like hugging face emoji. And they're another one of these like out in the open, releasing a lot of models companies. We're going to see this technology. The last thing I'll say is we're going to see this technology moving from web interfaces like we just saw into a lot of other applications. Microsoft is a close partner with OpenAI. They've been very clear about the fact that they're looking to push this technology into Microsoft Word and Excel and elsewhere. Adobe has made announcements about moving generative AI, this kind of like, I'm going to give a prompt and get back some results, into Adobe Photoshop and other technologies. And the big thing that we're hearing a lot about is the movement of this directly into search, whether in Google search results. Microsoft has been experimenting with pushing ChatGPT into Bing. There's been really interesting stuff written about that that we might get into. But I think the important thing is this underlying technology is going to start showing up in many more places than just the sort of ChatGPT interface in the coming months and next year or two. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Wiley, I know that you've used this as a practitioner in the field, and there's so many different opportunities. They almost seem endless as far as how to use this for, you could write press releases or donor emails or grant reports and so many things. And I know you've actually applied this. So I'm hoping maybe you can share with your peers today that are on, how you've taken advantage of this and how they might be able to use this as well. And also please give like a brief intro before you talk.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Mary, for inviting me. And I'm excited to share this panel with Josh and Ashley. I've spent over 20 years in the nonprofit social impact and sports philanthropy space, and I'm actually glad to see, I think some of my former colleagues at the U.S. Soccer Foundation are here too. I currently consult for several municipalities and nonprofits, many of which are sports-based organizations. But over the past several years, I've also been teaching a graduate course at American University on innovation through new technologies, where we discuss AI among other topics as well. And one of the things that I think surprised me most about the popularity in the mainstream of AI tools like ChatGPT is how quickly it became accessible. And I think Josh talked about AI has been around for a while, but the way that they were able to make it accessible to people to use and interact with was amazing. And you see, Google and Meta, kind of with their pants down, trying to catch up because they've been working on it for a long time, but they didn't package it in this way or create a platform the way that Josh described they did. And so that's what kind of surprised me. And the way I kind of think about this in terms of work and how to interact it with what we do on a day-to-day basis with work is, we have Alexa, we have Google Home, we have Siri, those are cute, you kind of ask it and it's kind of like a web browser, like a Google web browser, search browser in voice, and it just kind of tells you what you need. But the way I think of it is if you're a Trekkie, I think of it as having data from Star Trek Next Generation sitting next to you, or even a more recent, example, Jarvis, Iron Man's Jarvis, like next to you, and you're having a conversation with this entity. And so you can get questions and answers at more of a sophisticated level and dig deeper and change what you're getting based on your questions. So I wanted to kind of share a few prompts that I kind of typed in. I think there might be someone from Project Backboard here. I don't know anything about Project Backboard, but I just went ahead and tried to figure it out. And I said, can you tell me about the organization, Project Backboard? And it told me exactly what it was, everything about it. And so that's pretty basic. You can probably get that from Google. And then I was like, well, what makes them unique as an organization? So they kind of talk about their focus on basketball courts, integration of arts and sports, their community involvement, and they go a little bit deeper. Then I'm like, well, let me look at a grant question I just recently had for one of my clients is, you know, how are you going to spend the money? So I was like, sorry, not there yet. What impact is what is the impact of the organization? And it kind of says, you know, it's not readily available to what I have, but let me share a little bit deeper. You know, they're in cities like Memphis and Los Angeles and St. Louis, among others, and you kind of go in a little bit more depth in the answers that they provided. Then I was like, well, if I'm applying for a grant, one of the questions is how are you going to use the money? So let me ask that. So then they spit out court renovations and upgrades, artistic collaborations, community engagement initiatives. All of these things, I know nothing about Project Backboard, but I could probably write a grant for you in the next 30 minutes to an hour as if I've worked there for years. There are some limitations because there's information and data, strategic planning, future planning that, you know, I may not be privy to because I don't work there, and there may be some really great plans up ahead, changes in strategy, data that you just collected that's not available here, so, you know, like numbers. But essentially, I could put together a pretty good proposal based off of my questioning, and I would just keep going and just continue to have conversations based off of grant questions they have. And again, I didn't know anything about it now, but I think I know quite a bit about Project Backboard through this, through ChatGPT. So the other thing I think is really, really, you know, helpful for many of you, I think, in the space that you're in is social media. So I think we use social media. A lot of us like maybe want to use it or think we should use it. It's one of the strongest ways to reach out to people, build the organization's brand, but also build your own personal brand. But for me, it takes a lot of time to like figure out what you're going to post and then like, you know, post it. And then, so one of the things you can use with, you know, for ChatGPT is helping you just do posts and making it quick. What would take you, you know, hours could take you minutes to figure it out. So I don't know anything about the JED Foundation, but I said, I want to make a social media post for Instagram and Facebook and celebrate and acknowledge Autism Awareness Month, which is this month, and promote the work. Can you help me write one? So it helped me write one. Absolutely, here it is. So you can just essentially tweak it a little bit, but cut and paste if you just don't have time. And I was like, well, can you edit it for a Twitter post? Because, you know, I want to put it on Twitter. Sure. And then you just cut down the words and you can put it on Twitter. And then I'm like, well, what would a TikTok look like? Yeah, let's give a whole script of what TikTok would look like for us to create one. And it does it for us. So we don't have to take the energy and time to do it ourselves. The biggest thing about this is it just saves time. It saves a ton of time. We want to be able to put our own voice in. We want to put our own, you know, authentic selves in there. But this is how it's helping many, many people be more efficient in their work. The last thing is just regular email correspondence. You know, it takes a long time to write emails and maybe you just want to reach out. So I'm like, hey, can you write me a short email for a grant request from the Kellogg Foundation on behalf of the Jay's Cares Foundation? So they're like, sure, let's do it. Literally an email like this would take me like hours because I spent so much time. Like, it's got to be perfect. You're going to ask for money or you're going to, you know, write someone who's really important or as a board member or a stakeholder. Literally just does it for you. And the crazy thing about this is it's not just like formal things. I was like, hey, let's have fun with it. Let's write this in the voice of Captain Jack Sparrow. So it's like, all right, matey, requesting a grant. Like literally it can do things, anything you can ask and it can help you with. So these are just kind of examples of the ways that you can use it, talk to it, communicate with it, and really go back and forth like you're having a conversation with someone and they can build it out for you. So these are just really, really basic things actually that ChatGPT can do. There are so many other things it can do at such a higher, more sophisticated level in other programs, not just ChatGPT, but you know, there are AI programs that can create edited videos with sound, images, and cut them perfectly within minutes. Coding websites and apps. If you don't have any coding experience, it can help you do it yourselves. Creating music in voices and different voices and celebrities' voices. It's very, very scary, but very, very impressive at the same time. So there's so much more to it, and we've barely scratched the surface.
Wow, that was great, Wiley. Thanks. Ashley, I'd like to turn it to you. It seems like this is not only going to provide organizations with opportunities externally, but there are also use cases for AI internally. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how this is going to impact hiring, everything from writing a job description to reviewing resumes that might be written using technology. What do people who are seeking jobs right now, or those who are working on the hiring side, need to know, or at least be thinking about as it relates to this sort of emerging tech? And also don't forget to introduce yourself when you get rolling.
Certainly. Thanks, Mary. So I'm Ashley Hurd. So I'm the founder of Manager Method. So I've been a general counsel, head of HR. I now have Manager Method, where I provide training to organizations to help upskill managers. I work frequently with nonprofits, philanthropy-based organizations, and I love it. And so one thing I wanted to call out, as I saw Sue Peterson had her background of, and I think it said "Happy Birthday, Nona," which I'd assume is someone you work with. So that's all the type of thing that I love, is that type of public recognition. It made me smile very big. So I'm all about enhancing the employee experience and manager's experience. So along with that, absolutely, you're totally seeing ChatGPT all throughout employment, or as you're engaging other vendors for your organization. So you're seeing it on both sides, both as an organization looking to hire, and then those candidates that are coming through. So some things to keep in mind, and I saw that Wiley had responded, Mary had asked a question about, can you feed information? And so one thing, especially as an organization level, is to know ChatGPT is not a diary. This is not your private portal to have your information. This is like, just like when I advise managers, don't put anything in email you wouldn't want to see on the front page of, insert your favorite news website. Is with ChatGPT, it is, while it's not public and it's not, readily accessible for anyone to go and see what is this person I know searching on ChatGPT, that information is not private, and they are clear about that in their privacy policy. That being said, human behavior, you've seen situations like a doctor that wrote, inserted patient confidential medical information and said, can you write a letter to their insurance company? Or another Cyberhaven, I think is the name of the organization that tracks for organizations what's its employees are putting into ChatGPT if they're logged in through their company email. And they saw one had put their company strategy document and asked it to create a PowerPoint deck. And so I see that to be mindful that as you're putting things out, because one of the benefits of ChatGPT and the other AI tools is to constantly develop, that means they're sharing it with developers, with all sorts of people. So as an organization, as you're putting in things for hiring about candidates, be really mindful. Creating things like job descriptions is an absolutely fantastic use of ChatGPT. Putting things specific to candidates or their addresses, things like that, I would generally say don't do that. And so just keeping in mind anything you're putting out there, again, while not readily trackable, I would have no idea to find out what anybody's putting in there. There's other people that can. So as an organization, one of the things you can do is exactly that. Hey, I need to put together a job description. Same for Wiley. Having been on the HR side, I've put together job descriptions. I've literally put together job descriptions for roles that I've had, and still it will take hours because I'm like, well, surely somebody's doing something better. Let me look at all sorts of competitors. And the idea is never to copy, but it's to get best practices. ChatGPT can get you not to the vetted best practices, but it can get you there. So as an example, and I won't screen share it or do the screenshots, but I put a prompt into ChatGPT, a very basic prompt to say, write me a job description. I didn't get the job, but write me a job description generally with information that candidates need to know. I did it based on what a common search might be for someone that's really just starting out with ChatGPT. And it generated a job description, and it was okay. Ashley, as the HR and lawyer, would have a lot of feedback. Oh, these are ways you can phrase things to really make our organization shine. Or, for example, what it put out didn't include a salary range. if you're in certain locations as an employer, you have to provide that salary range. And so I, as a follow-up prompt, wrote, now can you provide a salary range? And it said, okay, it gave me the same thing with the salary range, 60 to 80,000. That's what ChatGPT apparently thinks a marketing associate, which is the role it selected to give me, should put. But I still then, as a person, would say, okay, when I'm advising organizations on salary ranges, I tell people, remember, the person that's reading this is still in 2023 a person. And so even just putting a salary range, I, as a best practice, tell organizations provide more information on that. Like ChatGPT said, depending on salary or depending on qualifications, whatever generic language that you do tend to see in most job postings. But I tell organizations, okay, tell me specifically what that would look like. And to put in, like, at the lower range, it would be this. At the higher range, you'd be able to do this independently. And I say that when you're hiring individuals, because the more transparent you can be in that job posting, you stand out. And there are many benefits that philanthropic-based organizations or sports organizations have, where the salary might not be as competitive as other places, but there's language I like to see to highlight the great things you can have. You may have more PTO, you may have flexibility with entertainment, you may get access to games and things like that. And so what I say about ChatGPT is just exactly like Josh and Wiley have said, it's amazing technology. It's absolutely a time saver, but there still is going to need to be that human lens of adding things in there and taking a step back and saying, this is great, but rarely should you be copying and pasting things from ChatGPT. Look at it and add things and have employees add things. And on the flip side, as you see candidates, I say, totally use ChatGPT for your resume, for building your resume, how to phrase things. But just like that, don't copy and paste. Organizations will be having tools to be able to vet if something was just ChatGPT'd. And I tell people the best secret sauce is employees that know how to use ChatGPT. So I think it's great if people use it for their resumes, if you do a cover letter, all those things. But put your flair in it, and you still have to have that human touch. And having ChatGPT is a real skill. So one of the best things, when I listen to Josh talk about these things, I literally am soaking up every word, because I didn't even know what ChatGPT stood for, but I've used it and I've played around with it to learn how to really get specific in your prompts, go back and forth with questions. And so while it's still free, and I have the subscription-based version of it, but you can still generally get into it free. It just can be a little delayed or shut down every once in a while. Playing around with it and getting that is awesome. But having ChatGPT experience now, if you read HR Brew, a newsletter, I totally recommend it. If your role involves anything related to HR or hiring at your organization, again, no plug, it's a great one. Just like an hour ago, their newsletter said 10% of companies now are looking for candidates that have ChatGPT experience. And so having candidates that have that is an absolute skill as an organization, using it and just getting in there and playing around. But for hiring, for interview questions, what are interview questions I can ask? Things like that, it can totally get you started, but not just saying interview questions I can ask, get specific about the role. But again, just remember, it's not a diary.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Josh, real quick, we'll go back to you if you have any final thoughts on the opportunities or just other exciting things with this.
One thing that I would just underscore from what Ashley just said is, ChatGPT as the sort of best version, the most direct version of implementation of these technologies that we have access to right now. They're fascinating tools to generate new knowledge or to generate anything. But some of the most interesting experiences I've had have been almost treating it as a tutor, saying, there's also incredible educational opportunities to have personalized learning, to say, I would like to learn about statistics. Can you walk me through a 12-part course on how to learn, basic business statistics? And it will break that up and it will start, and you can ask questions as you go and it will respond. That sort of chat interface, I go back to what Wiley said. What's incredibly powerful, and I think why this has really caught so much attention, is this ability to have a conversation and interact with the system. And so you can ask it to do things for you. You can also ask it to teach you. And I think we're going to see a huge amount of interesting development in the coming months on the education front as well.
I think that's a really great segue, Josh, into, we've talked so much about the great stuff and the opportunities that this technology presents, but we absolutely have to also discuss the risks and the challenges that go along with it. And so I'm going to open it up to all three of you to share, keeping in mind how we're using the technology and what some of the main concerns are. And so I'll start with you, Ashley. Can you talk about how you see this impacting hiring practices? How quickly are we, and I think you started to answer this earlier, are we going to need AI skills in order to be competitive as a candidate? It seems that there are risks that biases could naturally and often unconsciously be built into this technology or to humans. Could it also be part of the technology? Will the tech make bias better or worse? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Completely. I think the two parts of the question. So the first is, how quickly will we need to? I mean, I know a number of individuals that are attending today are going to say, I don't have experience in that. And it's okay. Like, I don't think it's a need. I really don't. Maybe at some point in the future. Right now, it's not a need, but it is a great to have, and it will make your life easier. And I mean that from like grocery lists to the hiring to the, what I'm actually talking about is hiring. I think as a business, it can make your life so much easier. And so being able to really work with it, it really is kind of similar to how when the search engines came on the internet and being able to find that information, and it's incredible, or like a social media first came and learning how you use it. And so I think practicing in that, and even going to ChatGPT and saying, what are ways I can use ChatGPT, better, or what can I use it? Put what your role is. This is my role. How can I use ChatGPT? I think starting there and then going from there. Okay, so tell me about this. Those are places that I think anybody can start with. And I know Josh put the link in the chat. And so going there and having that window open, because you're all paying attention during this entire webinar, but having that and just saying, like, how can I use ChatGPT in my role as at a philanthropy? And and I think you can really start going from there. And I think that's a great place to start. The flip side is biases. I mean, I have a social media account. I'm at Manager Method on TikTok and Instagram. And I haven't leveraged ChatGPT in any of my videos yet. I allude to it and talk about it a little bit, but I get comments sometimes, and I got a comment that stuck with me recently of someone saying they used to be an engineer and the team of engineers was all male. And so when they developed a feature, it would not, and it was a voice recognition feature, it could not recognize females' voices. And it was just, they hadn't tested, they hadn't even tested it. And so I say that because there are humans involved in this. And even with the technology-based learning, biases can be inevitable. One thing that's been encouraging I've seen is responses from ChatGPT. If you try to write something negative or things, often ChatGPT will say, hey, I can't, I'm not a negative tool, or things like that, or I cannot help. I do not further discrimination or harassment. And my guess is they're building in some overcorrections of that. You may put something that's totally innocuous and you're like, no, that's not what I meant. But they are very, I think, with how powerful the technology is, what I'm reading, and I saw Josh nodding, and I know Josh and Wiley are far more expertise on the technical aspects, but I do think that they're trying to protect against this. So what I will be interested in watching is how they're ensuring to avoid those biases and being mindful of that. I'll be watching, but I do think that they are appreciating that can creep in. And so I'll be really eager to hear Josh and Wiley's comments here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious too, even compounding some of the issues we've already seen in social media and those algorithms, if ChatGPT can learn. But Josh, thinking about some of these concerns, some examples that we heard, from the group is, does it fabricate things it doesn't know? How does it handle when it doesn't know? And then a really specific example is in the funding cycle. And so if now everybody can write a grant without having a grant writer on their staff, are funders going to be inundated with more proposals? Can they be using AI to review the proposals? Like, what are some of the things in those areas that your thoughts are?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes on all counts, honestly. So first, I think it's really important to reinforce, as I said earlier, these generative AI models don't know things in the sense that you or I or others know things. They are basically a huge pile of likelihoods that if this set of characters, then this set of characters is more likely than others. They're doing that at such a scale that it actually seems like an actual intelligent conversation. But I think it's really important not to overly assume like thought or things like that. Part of the reason that's really important is because there are times, there are many documented instances so far, if you interact with these systems enough, you will find there are times when it will assert a fact or it will say something that isn't grounded in reality, because in fact, nothing it says is truly grounded in its knowledge of reality. It's just, this is the most likely response to this prompt. And so the term that you'll see used for that is hallucination, which is an interesting phrase, but it's actually, I think, a really important one, because the model is giving you a response that seems accurate from the perspective of the internals of the model, but it's not grounded in reality. It's literally as if it or you in interaction with it is seeing something that's not actually there. And so there's a lot of really interesting research on why this happens. To Ashley's point, OpenAI and others are trying really hard to put guardrails in place that sit on top of these models to make sure both that biases and that these kind of hallucinations can be caught. But you really have to be very like careful and thoughtful and I wouldn't necessarily say suspicious, but don't take for granted that everything that that ChatGPT or other AI models put out is absolutely factual and you want to assess it that way. It's still very early days for this technology, and to be honest, a lot of it is we don't entirely know how these things are working on the inside anyways. There's no manual for ChatGPT. People are trying things, seeing what happens, and then sort of going on Twitter and talking about the different posts, the prompts that they've used. It's that sort of model. So it's evolving very quick. The one other point you asked about in terms of volume, I actually think that's a huge point. I mean, there's tremendous power in terms of equity, in terms of lowering barriers to put kinds of capability and expertise in the hands of more people. That also means that you potentially increase the volume of everything being generated. We'll have more images. If you were paying attention over the past week or two, it's not quite the same technology under the hood, but the song release that purported to be by Drake and The Weeknd, that was a totally fabricated song using AI technology to generate voice simulation. I think we're going to see dramatic increases in the volume of content in the world. I think in the particular context of philanthropy, it's absolutely the case. There's an example of that got some attention in February of a science fiction magazine called Clark World that actually stopped taking inbound submissions because it was getting too many artificially generated short story submissions, and they couldn't handle their review process, couldn't handle the inbound flood. So one of the things that I wonder is whether on the philanthropy side, if the number of well-crafted, polished inbound grants gets higher, maybe we're going to need to use these AI technologies to sift them on the other end. And then you have this almost arms race of use of AI, both on the grant seeker and the grant giver side. And these tools will just, be used to manage an ever-growing sort of volume of correspondence.
Yeah, and Wiley, I'd love if you have anything to add about risks that you're aware of and what you think people should be paying attention to moving forward in the space.
Yeah, I think Josh mentioned something that I think really important to emphasize, because when I did the sample, it was to basically asking it to kind of write everything for me. I would not recommend having ChatGPT or any other AI, tool to write it for you. Write your own grant, because again, your voice, what you know about it, and have it help you, assist you in your writing. And whether it be cutting words down because of word count, or making it more concise or emphasizing certain points. But I wouldn't recommend is kind of Josh kind of talked about, and Ashley, like you want to be able to put your own information, your own authenticity into your grant. And because it's generated and it takes from everything else, if everyone uses it that way, all grants are going to look the same. And so speaking to kind of what funders need to be aware of is that, and also academia, and I'll kind of talk a little bit briefly on both of them, but funders have to look at changing the way they approach funding these, because it's not just about applications now, because if they all kind of look alike and look the same, you're going to need to do interviews, you're going to need to do site visits, you're going to have to change up how you want to vet these organizations and do more work in order to make sure that what they're saying matches what they're actually doing. And so you can have, AI make it sound like flowers and daisies, but really in reality, what does it look like? So funders really, really have to adapt and adjust. Same with academia. And I think there's a few folks from higher ed here too. There are tools to help kind of identify writing that is done by AI, but everyone's really smart. So what they do is filter it through multiple AI writing programs. So then it becomes harder for these other kind of preventative software to detect, because it's changed so much, but all they do is run it through multiple programs. So academics, schools have to, and classes have to adapt by having more in-class writing assignments or papers. You write it in class, or find ways to block it, whether it be through software or through the internet within the university. You can kind of block certain things and access to certain things. Still ways around it, but there are tougher code of conducts and policies around penalties about using this, because it's not technically plagiarism, but it kind of is. So it's very, very interesting. Those two areas are going to be really, really important to look at. But I think the most important thing I want to emphasize what Ashley said is that it's not your diary. It's a learning tool. It's a learning machine. So when you give it to them, they will take that and share it with others in a different way. So if you have similar organizations and you're kind of talking about your work, they'll write it for another one and present it to another one, because it's always learning and it's always taking your information. It's not your diary. And I think Samsung, which is great way that Ashley kind of framed it. I love that. And, there's a programmer from Samsung that accidentally leaked proprietary code and got in big trouble and leaked it on ChatGPT. And that then becomes the property of OpenAI, and they can then use it and share it with others, and not knowingly either. They're not doing it intentionally, but it can just share it with others. So be careful what you share. If you have any proprietary information, don't share it.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think one of the final things we want to talk about before we open it for Q&A is, to us, like, this already seems very futuristic, to be honest, but when we think of like 5-10 years, even further ahead in the future, what trends should we be following? Like, what will this even look like at that point in time? And we might not know, but let's, what do you all think? So Wiley, we'll start with you.
I think it's hard to say. I think the efficiency of people, there's going to be more work churned out, and I think certain industries are going to change, like customer service. AI is going to be able to replace some of that. I think a lot of positions aren't going to be replaced, but it's going to be changed. It's going to look differently. But in sports, I think not so much in our organizations or kind of what we do, but like on the field, many of you work in the sports field, you're going to see performance analytics. You're going to see a lot of in-game adjustments and identifying strategy in game. I mean, we see it in timeouts. Like, they used to have papers that they would, photos that they would be showing of plays that they'd give the quarterback. And now they had the Surface tablet where they would flip through, and it was like, whoa, Surface tablet. Now, instead of kind of in between timeouts and on the sideline, coaches are going to get real-time AI strategy and looking at weaknesses within offenses and defenses during the game across all sports. NBA already is doing that with an AI assistant, and they're going to be able to get real-time information. And you're going to see that in professionals. It's going to come down to college. It's going to go down to high school and even younger. And things like injury prevention too. I think you're going to see a lot of data analytics and figuring out how to, for both training and identifying injuries, AI is going to play a role in that as well. So there's so much application to it, especially in the sports industry, fan engagement, scouting and recruitment, all of these things. AI is going to play a major role in within the next several years.
This is really great. I already see the chat starting to light up with some conversation and questions, and we're going to open it up for Q&A for about the final 10 minutes. But before I do that, I did want to remind everyone that the session has been hosted today by the Sports and Entertainment Impact Collective and SEIC. We're a multifaceted community, so we do free events like this, but we also hold a virtual executive education certificate program. Enrollment for our 2023 cohort is now open, and that session will kick off in August. Alicia has popped a link in the chat for anyone who's here and interested in learning more about our certificate offering. And if you have any interested colleagues, please don't hesitate to pass that link along. For the question and answer, you can use the chat feature now. We'd encourage you, if you have any reflections or stories or experiences, which I saw is happening as it relates to data accuracy, but we'd love to hear what organizations you're at so we can start to share some of that learning. And at this point, we'll open it up to question and answer, and we'll also, take a look. Everyone submitted some great stuff when they signed up. So if you're quiet, we have some questions to get rolling, but please don't be quiet. Share your questions in the chat.
And while we're waiting, I just want to offer Ashley and Josh, if you have any thoughts on that, the question about the future as well, if you know things we should be paying attention to or what this might look like.
I'm happy to jump in quickly. As I saw, I think it is two birds, one stone. I think Mark Levinstein had said, be careful with facts, and you're absolutely right. So lawyer Ashley has been in a lot of things where people say they've asked, write a brief on, like a legal brief on something with hopefully nobody in this webinar has interested in, and ChatGPT will create something, and all of the cases are completely made up. And so if you were to use that, it could have absolute ramifications. So more notably, for your industry, and this threads into what Wiley said, is you do have to be really careful, because it is, it's making things up. So fact-based things, it's not an encyclopedia. It's not the global encyclopedia. It's not there yet, maybe at some point. So as a trend, I think they'll have more human experts diving in and providing some of that content clarity there. But for things that you have expertise in, I think a really good example to avoid what Wiley talked about people using it for bad reasons, but especially your employees and your teams who likely are going to be using it, but cautioning them and doing in a meeting. What I would recommend is have a meeting and practice this in advance, but think about something you have an expertise in. That's what grants are we eligible for as an organization, or something that's very, very fact specific, and put details in there and have it generate something that to be false, and show your team and say, we want to lean into ChatGPT, but also you have to be careful. And so we want to have conversations about how we use it. And I think that also, if you are in a more educational field, or you're an adjunct professor or anything like that, I think talking to students about that and saying there's ways you can use it, but you do have to be careful. I think giving those examples and putting it in front of people, but also as leaders in your organizations, one way I think can be great for ChatGPT is when you're giving talks to your employees or your donors and having it generate ideas. The employee-based talks you've seen in the last week or two, some CEOs have some moments that have gone viral for the wrong reasons, where they've gone off the cuff talking about employees and trying to be motivational. Didn't quite look up that way. You can just look up CEO Zoom call if you want to see any examples. Doesn't tend to give good ones, but it can give you talking points that can be a great place to start from, that can resonate with employees. That is one thing I've seen with ChatGPT. A lot of the language is really good for employee engagement and can get you started there as well. So it's not just hiring, but even in employee communication. I think that's a trend that you'll see.
Josh, any thoughts on what we might see even 10, 20 years from now?
Oh man, I think even like 3 years out is somewhat unclear at the moment. I think I, like a lot of people, have been really just quite surprised at how quickly like some of this technology has moved in the past 6 months. In general, I think, I mean, this echoes things that have been said today. In general, I think these technologies are, in their current form, incredibly powerful as collaborators. And I think we're going to start seeing more of the, actually, I do think it's going to be really interesting once these, once things like ChatGPT really get integrated with Siri and Alexa and voice agents, when we start being able to interact much more directly, even with voice, as opposed to just via written text. I'm seeing people talking about connecting these systems to other systems, you know, so it's not just a sort of like information exchange, but you start being able to have AI assistants actually acting in the world for you and doing things, whether via services like TaskRabbit or elsewhere. I think it's going to be much more of a kind of back and forth, and we're going to start seeing this moving more out into the world beyond our computer screens. I don't know how I feel about that. It's exciting, it's terrifying, but one way or another, I think it's definitely a direction things are moving, and we need to be paying attention. The only other thing that I'll just say is I talk to a lot of people who are using GPT tools to help them do software development, and I think it's actually going to put the ability to create apps, to write software, to do things that traditionally required a very specific kind of expertise in the hands of many more people. I think that's a really exciting thing. If you want to say, you know, I need a website that does this, this, and this. There's a great example of somebody using the latest GPT model who actually drew a website on a napkin and then uploaded the image, and it generated the website in code that could then be uploaded and uploaded to a server and made live. I mean, it's incredibly powerful to think about the way these technologies can lower barriers to expertise. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of sort of rich development on that front in coming years.
Incredible. I think one final question for you all before we wrap up is, as everyone who's in attendance today goes back to their offices and conversations with staff, like, I attended this thing and now I learned a little bit and maybe we should try it. If there's so many skeptics out there and so many people who just aren't sure. And I know we've talked about the risks and the opportunities, but any other advice for folks here who might really want to just go explore or start, but might run into some barriers in their organizations? Like, anything to overcome the skeptics?
I have a suggestion. So it's Mark Levinstein. I write a newsletter. It wasn't on purpose, but to my friends, sort of giving them updates about here's what's going on in UVA sports. So the last one I did, I first said to ChatGPT, please write an update for UVA sports. And then I put it in the beginning of my email. It said we lost to Creighton. I mean, we never played Creighton. It just made stuff up. But they could see it. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to go there. So for your staff who haven't gone there, to show them its potential, or I'm thinking about having a podcast and the subject will be X, give me some ideas of names for the podcast. And it can be incredibly creative as a starting point for a brainstorm. It'll give you in 12 seconds, 10 ideas that are all pretty darn good. Or and at present, it can't do logos and things like that, although it can do some animation and things if you in the DALL-E function. But just to go out there and write something and show people, I think is important, because they're not going to try it until and that'll get them started. So I suggest, get your people exploring with it so they have some idea of how it works and what its limits are.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I know personally, I'm not sure I understood it as much without seeing it or using it. So that's great feedback. Any other thoughts, Josh, Weiler, Ashley, on?
I think that was a great point to try it. But I think, one of the things about nonprofits in general that I always get frustrated about is the slow adoption of technology all across the board with nonprofits. And I know there's a resource issue and whatnot, but don't be left behind. This is going to help, especially with organizations that are more conscious of the resources. This is why you'd want to use it, because it helps those that don't have as many resources to be more efficient with their time and with the resources that they have. And so don't be left behind. People are going to adopt this. It's going to happen. And so you definitely want to be on the forefront, or at least be there when all of this becomes more and more mainstream. So that's what I would say.
I'll say on the hiring front and the employee front, a question a lot of people have is a fear for their jobs. Right now there's a lot of lack of stability in the economy and jobs, but a lot of people make it nervous. Is it going to replace all of our jobs? And Wiley touched on this, but I think there are some customer service type roles or copywriting type roles, but also, just like I said, with ChatGPT, somebody's got to be putting that influence in it and putting that voice. And you really are going to get in trouble if you try to just copy and paste in any type of written word or anything like that. So I think leaning into it as an organization and asking employees, how can we use it effectively? Because a lot of employees are going to be worried about this, but talking about how can we adopt it to make us work more efficiently and effectively, and turning that question over and opening up the conversation, because many workplaces won't have it at all, including in the nonprofit space. And so I think asking that and leaning into it will really help in your leadership and working within your teams and generate some really cool ideas, because I bet some are out there that you have not heard yet.
One way that I've heard it put is that we're all editors now, in a context of AI assisted work, and it's a different kind of work. I think it's a deeply human kind of work in a lot of ways, but I think that's sort of the direction things are headed.
This has been really fantastic. I want to give a big thank you to Ashley, Josh, and Wiley for sharing your knowledge and being a resource to everyone here. So thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending. Check out the SEIC certificate and our website to learn more about the events that we put on, as well as our educational programs. And finally, please do keep us posted on how you're using this technology. That was kind of a perfect ending for us, Josh, of saying, Ashley, people are using it in ways we haven't even thought of here. We'd love to hear from you. Our goal at SEIC is to create community and connection and to help people learn through one another and through expertise. And so if you come up with something great that comes out of this, or totally separately, we'd love for you to share that with us in the future. And so, we will share a recap of this event so that if you want to refer back to anything that you heard, that will be available as well. And with that, I'll just say thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.